Alrighty, so this is the last match week before we get into the June international break, and we're gonna also kind of have a break before we get a big full slate of action that's going to be happening in MLS. In fact, after this week, we won't get a big full slate of MLS action until the middle of June, which definitely that gives me time to do some fun videos or videos that I've been wanted to do, but I've never had time to do so because I've been doing previews, review, and doing news of the week episodes for and so forth. But one thing that I've also will say about doing the June international friendlies is that there's still going to be MLS game. Yes, I know people are still complaining about how in MLS, for whatever reason, they still have a competitive game during the international break, and a lot of teams have complained the fact that that is the case because they're going to be missing some of their best players in those games, and that they're basically forced to play their B team, which sounds unfair because of the fact that they have to play during the international break. But the good news is, at least one thing I will say MLS have done so well this season is that they have cut down in terms of some of these games that is going to be happening during international break, and they're trying to make it as fair as possible in terms of putting teams that maybe play in these international friendly kind of day, but also playing in an MLS regular season game where they're not going to missing a lot of players during that stretch. But again, there's still going to be that ongoing debate about how people and teams still hated the fact that their team is playing during the international break when basically no league in the world does that. But let us actually begin talking about this full slate of action, and we're going to just actually talk about the 11 games that's going to be happening on Saturday, as tomorrow I'm actually going to talk about the 2 Sunday game that is happening, and I actually got time to talk about those 2 Sunday games. I don't have to just kind of rush to get back home to kind of watch some of the matinee games and then do the review or the preview for the Sunday game, is because we don't have matinee games that's going to be happening on Saturday. Pretty much all these games is going to be happening in the evening, which is good and bad news because, like I said, I can do the preview for the Sunday game without me kind of have to rush it, kind of do it during halftime of a matinee game. But bad news is that there's going to be a lot of game overlapping each other. I mean, there's going to be one point, there's going to be 9 games that's going to overlapping at the same time. But we start off with the first one, which is LAFC versus the San Jose Earthquakes, as this game will start at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific, but the actual kickoff is 3:08 p.m. local time. And if you thought that because there's no matinee game and there's no 3:30 p.m. Eastern, 12:30 p.m. Pacific game, mean that there is no Twitter game, oh boy, you are wrong, because we will get Twitter games this week, unfortunately. And what's even more unfortunate that we're gonna get 2 Twitter games, because I think on Sunday, before the nightcap game that we're gonna have, we actually do have another Twitter game that's gonna be happening on Sunday, which is a very rare thing to see, because we usually never see like Sunday game that's gonna be on Twitter. But this one, of course, is on Twitter, and in terms of the all-time meeting, LAFC have a 7-0-4 record, but that record has started to be even out a little bit, because before it was all LAFC against the Quakes, and how LAFC seems to be one of those teams that the Quakes, whenever they face against them, it's always going to be an automatic loss. But at least they kind of have even out the record a little bit in these last couple of years. But really, for the key points for the Quakes coming into this game is that they are going through this tough 3-game road stretch, and that, again, I'm still hearing a lot of Quakes fans that have been very angry about what happened in that game against the Republic, and rightfully so. I mean, anytime when you lose to a USL Championship side in the US Open Cup, it's definitely not something that the fan base will be very happy. But again, now that I think this could be I think this is also a game where you gotta say the Quakes gotta get something out of this game, because if they do lose this game, I think Alex Carvalho would definitely be under heavy pressure and definitely be under a lot of scrutiny. I mean, he's already under a lot of scrutiny in terms of not fielding the strongest team against the Republic, but in this game, if you decide not to field the strongest team because you decide to rest some of your guys to play this game on the road against LAFC, yeah, you expect to get a result. And unfortunately, I don't know if they can get a result out of it, because for LAFC, they also suffer a disappointing US Open Cup exit after they lost to the Galaxy in El Tráfico, this time US Open Cup edition. But one thing I know about LAFC is that despite they lose El Tráfico, it doesn't mean that they go through a bad stretch. I mean, they bounce back most of the time that they lose El Tráfico against the Galaxy, and I think this could be an example of that, because again, LAFC this season has been really good at home, and that that I expect them to get all 3 points in this game against a Quakes team that, like I said, as much as I know the last couple games the Quakes have been red hot. I mentioned before that I simply still don't think this is a playoff team, or this is going to be sustainable with the way that, that's part of the new head coach kind of boost. And, we'll see whether or not if this new head coach boost, or in this case, a new interim head coach boost, is starting to go away a little bit. At least when we saw these last 2 games, it seems like it has gone away a bit because, this is really the first time, at least in the last game, where there was a lot of criticism toward Alex Cavallo in terms of his team selection, and especially in terms of his tactics and even his substitution, and that, this maybe is the beginning of the end where, Quakes fans are going to have their honeymoon period over with Alex Cavallo. And I know some might say that, well, that seems like a very quick honeymoon period. Well, that's the Quakes fan base in a nutshell. I mean, they want any success as possible, and that if things start to go wrong, they know that this team is going to start sucking a game, as it's been the case for pretty much the past decade. But now moving on, in terms of the next match, is Atlanta United versus the Columbus Crew, as this game will be the first of 2 games that will start at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. Now, Atlanta has an even 4 wins, 4 draw, and 4 loss record, while Columbus have a 3-4-5 record. All-time meeting is actually dead even between both of these teams. 6 wins apiece for both of these teams, and surprisingly, there has never been a draw in this matchup. I mean, anytime whenever I see that kind of meeting, or the all-time meeting being like that, it's kind of a little bit surprising, because you would think that with that many matchup, they would at least drawn once in their history, but that's just not been the case. It's been neither one of these teams getting the win. Now, the key points coming into this game is that, for Atlanta, it is pretty clear that they are trying to stay afloat right now. I mean, they are just decimated with injuries in these last couple of weeks. I mentioned in the news of the week, they lost Andrew Gutman as the latest casualty in terms of the long list of injuries that they have right now with their starting 11. Like, literally their back line is pretty much completely wrecked because of injury, and there's still a question whether or not if Joseph Martinez indeed is going to be coming back in this game. Now, for the Columbus Crew, I mean, is this an automatic L? Because it's a road game. Now, one thing I will say that maybe it's not an automatic L is that one of the time when the Crew did get a road win was against Atlanta United, and it was actually back in, I think, 2019, when Atlanta was still considered the class of the Eastern Conference, and they really shocked everybody by getting a road win against Atlanta. But besides that, I've talked about how this team has really struggled on the road for the past couple of years, and that, this season is no different. I mean, I don't think they have actually got a win so far on the road, which shouldn't be a surprise, because again, this is a team that road wins is scarce whenever the Crew basically go on the road. And maybe this could be an automatic L, though. Again, with Atlanta being decimated with injuries, maybe they could have a chance to sneak out of Mercedes-Benz Stadium with a point or two. I mean, Mercedes-Benz Stadium once was definitely considered a fortress for Atlanta United. These last couple of years, I've seen some teams that have been able to walk away with points and able to walk away with 3 points. So it's not as much of a fortress as it's been before, but it is still a stadium that, Atlanta does have a lot of success and able to get a win. And let's see if they can do so against a team that struggled to get road wins throughout these past couple of years. Now, moving on, in terms of the next match, is Toronto FC versus the Chicago Fire, and safely say that this is pretty much the desperation derby of the week. In fact, it's not even the desperation derby. You would say that this is pretty much a wooden spoon derby, as I mentioned in one of the key points, as both of these teams have 2 of the worst record in the Eastern Conference, with TFC have a 3-3-7 record, and the Chicago Fire have a 2-5-6 record. As this game was also started at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific, but the actual kickoff is 7:08 p.m. local time. All-time meeting, Toronto has a 13-11-9 record, and again, for the key points, it's pretty much a wooden spoon derby, and it's also a game where both teams are looking to finally end their winless run. I mean, both teams are combined with a total of 15 games without a wins, with TFC having gone winless in the last 6 games, and Chicago have the longest winless run right now in the league with 9 games. And yeah, with a desperation derby, or in this case a wooden spoon derby, at least in the Eastern Conference, I won't be surprised this game could be crazy. I mean, we've seen it before where even in the worst game, or a game that you have two bottom feeder, they can put out a lot of goals, and that the game could really turns out to be a barn burner. But don't be surprised, this could also be a 0-0 resort, because again, both of these teams, or at least in Chicago case, I know they finally did start scoring again, especially in the game against the Red Bulls where they scored 3 goals. But besides that, yeah, they still struggle in terms of that. And for TFC, I mean, there's been times that they have been able to score goals, but then there are times where they go through a dry spell, and that, yeah, we'll see how this game is going to go, and especially for both of these teams that were supposed to be better than where they are this season. I mean, you could say that these two teams, when I do make a video in terms of talk about the most disappointing teams so far in the MLS 2022 regular season, you know these two teams is definitely going to be right up there in terms of the top 5 most disappointing team that I will do a video. I'll probably do it during when there's not a lot of MLS game, doing the June International friendly, to look at who are the 5 most disappointing MLS teams so far this season. But now moving on in terms of the next match. So to the 2 most disappointing team, to probably the 2 teams that is off to a surprising good start. Well, for one team, it's kind of a surprising good start, but in a way that we kind of saw it coming. But for the other, we did not see it coming. And that, of course, is Montreal versus FC Cincinnati. And I think you can guess which team I'm talking about that we did not expect them to get off to such a good start. And one team that, we kind of expected to get off to a good start, but it's still kind of surprising because of how poor they start the season. But, in terms of the all-time meeting, as it's going to be 3-1 and 2 in favor of FC Cincinnati. But before, Cincinnati used to dominate this series. Like, Montreal used to be a team that Cincinnati loved to play. It has not been the case, at least in these last couple of games. And especially, this is also a matchup that, at least in these last 3 games, we have seen some crazy score line. I mean, the last game between both of these teams, it was 4-3 win for Montreal. So this could be a game that could feature a lot of goals, especially with both of these attack being very good this season. But coming into this game, Montreal has a 6-2-5 record, while Cincinnati have a 6-1-6 record. This, of course, is the first of 3 games that will kick off at 7:30 p.m. Well, we'll start at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 4:30 p.m. Pacific, but the actual kickoff is 7:38 p.m. local time. And really for Montreal, can they get back to winning ways after back-to-back loss? I mean, Montreal has started to kind of come back down to earth after they really shot up the cannon in the Eastern Conference, being at the top of the Eastern Conference at one point, but back-to-back loss means that they now drop down to 4th position. And yeah, we'll see whether they can bounce back. And it's not going to be easy, because they're basically facing against a Cincinnati team that one of the reasons why they're all to such a strong start this season isn't really because of their home form. And I swear, this season we are starting to see more teams, especially in the Eastern Conference, tends to do better on the road than they do at home. I mean, I talk about the New York Red Bulls as a prime example. I might even talk about Orlando City as kind of an example too. But don't forget about FC Cincinnati. Like, their record so far on the road is 4-1-2, and that's one of the best road record that we've seen so far this season, and probably would be the best road record if the New York Red Bulls didn't just suffer their first road loss last week against Inter Miami, and their road record is still at 5-1-1. But yeah, we'll see how this game is going to go, and that, this is a matchup that in the beginning of the season, if I would have told you that this is a matchup between 2 really good teams, you would have definitely laughed at me. I mean, you expect Montreal to be that team to be decent, but nobody thought that FC Cincinnati would be as decent as they are, and they're definitely looking to try to get another road win, and that the road seems to be very good this season. And really, the 4-1-2 record, if you just kind of ignore the opening week again where they got absolutely shellacked by Austin FC, this team has been very good on the road, winning 4 out of their 6 road game ever since that 5-0 loss on the road against Austin FC. But moving on, in terms of the next match, we got New England versus the Philadelphia Union. So the Rams, I would say that they're kind of slowly getting themselves back to relevance. I mean, after all, they have gone 4 games without a loss. Well, for the Philadelphia Union, they're just trying to keep first place in the Eastern Conference. They know that team just about 90 miles up north of them, known as NYCFC, is definitely creeping up on them. But at least, last week they got a big victory to keep themselves at the top of the Eastern Conference with a 6-6-1 record, while the Revs have a 4-3-5 record. This game will start at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 4:30 p.m. Pacific, but the actual kickoff is 7:38 p.m. local time. All-time meeting, the Union does have the edge, 19-7-10 over the Revs. And in terms of the key points in this game, for Philly, yes, it was a huge victory against the Portland Timbers to finally end a bit of a winless run that they've been going through. But the question is, are they going to suffer a letdown after an emotional win, or they can once again go on the road, where this season on the road, the Union has also been decent on the road this year too. I mean, it's expected that they're a decent team on the road when you are at the top of the Eastern Conference. But for the Revs, like I said, they continue to slowly charge up the table. I mean, they're not charging up the way that we saw Montreal just kind of shot up the can, and even with NYCFC of how they also, I mentioned they also got off to a slow start, but after exiting CCL, they really shot up the cannon in the standings. But at least the Revs are right there. Like, I think they're only a point away from going above the red line, and consider what has happened a couple of weeks ago, where it looked like it was doom and gloom for this team with the way how they continue to struggle in the early part of the season. I think there is a chance that they would fancy themselves to get points in this game, but like I said, it's not going to be easy, because the Union this season, they've only lost once this year, and I believe they're the only team so far this season that have lost once this year, because I think every team has at least lost twice so far this season. So beating the Union is not an easy task, and we'll see whether if New England can do so. But moving on, in terms of the next match, is Orlando versus FC Dallas. So I'm not even going to mention the start and kickoff time, because it's exactly the same as this one and the one that I mentioned before. But Orlando coming into this game with a 6-3-4 record, while Dallas have a 6-4-3 record. All-time meeting, Dallas does have the advantage, 3-2-1 over Orlando City. And key points coming into this game, I mean, with how Orlando has been so inconsistent this season, you feel like they're due for a loss in that game. I mean, I think in the last couple of games, to just show you how inconsistent they've been, they draw their last game, and then they won their last one, and then they of course lost the other one. And of course, I don't include the U.S. Open Cup victory where they had against Inter Miami, which, by the way, could that be a letdown heading into this game, especially playing against a very good team that is FC Dallas. And one thing we know about Dallas is that this season, they have actually been decent so far on the road. Now, it's certainly a record that isn't among the best, but consider this is a team that have always struggled on the road. This year they have actually done very well on the road, and consider Orlando has also been a team that have not done well so far at home. You can fancy that maybe Dallas can pull this one off, and especially they're looking to try to bounce back after they suffer a rare home loss in the last game against FC, or not against FC Dallas, but against Minnesota United. They didn't lose by themselves, just for the record there. I'm definitely fancy that there could be a chance that Dallas, I wouldn't say it's an upset, because, they have been a very good team this season, and that, again, Orlando being so inconsistent this year, you just kind of feel like a loss is on the card in this game, unless if they can maybe prove me wrong, or prove everyone wrong, the fact that maybe they can finally find out some consistency and stay above the red line. Because you got to think, with how inconsistent that they've been, they're starting to get to that point where, yes, they're still near the top part of the Eastern Conference, but it doesn't take much when you have some of these teams, especially below them, that could be charging up the table and overtake them in the standings. But moving on, in terms of the next match, is Inter Miami versus the Portland Timbers. So, despite the fact that, Miami did had a disappointing exit against Orlando City in the U.S. Open Cup, they have actually been decent so far, with a 4-3-6 record, and they have pretty much won 4 out of their last 6 games ever since they started the season, with an 0-4 in their record. But for the Portland Timbers, yeah, I mentioned before, if you thought that 7-2 result is a turning point against Sporting KC, oh no, that hasn't been the case. I mean, they are still the Portland Timbers, a team that have come out the gate slowly, and because of the fact that it seems like, with the way that the league has been very, very kind of tight, and that there's a lot of parity shown this season, where there really isn't one team that is running away with the league, and especially near the middle part of the table, it seems like every single week, just as you think that maybe there's going to be a gap that could produce in those standings, it doesn't. I mean, there's still just a log jam that is happening, and because of the fact that despite the Timbers being very mediocre, they're still in the race. But for how long? That's the question. As this game will start at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, but the actual kickoff is 8:08 p.m. local time. There's only been one prior meeting between both of these teams, which the Timbers, of course, won the last meeting against Inter Miami last season. And of course, for the key points in this game, for Miami, we know that this is a team that is very hot and cold, and it seems like maybe they're in the stretch where they are on a bit of a hot streak. As I mentioned, they have won 4 out of their last 6, but in the last game, they probably produce a result that nobody saw it come in, with them knocking off the New York Red Bulls and become the first team to win against the Red Bulls, when the Red Bulls, of course, are on the road. But for the Timbers, again, they needed a win badly in this one, especially the fact that, it's been a poor week for them. Like, yes, they did get, well, actually, they did get 3 points last week, but that was because of the 7-2 result that they had against Sporting KC. And like I said, people thought that was maybe a turning point, and no, they lost 3-2 against the Quakes, and then they put probably one of the most uninspiring performances that they've ever played at Providence Park this season, or even last season, with them losing 2-0 to the Philadelphia Union. So yeah, this is a game that they definitely need to get a win, but it's not going to be easy, especially with the way that they're playing against a Miami team that, again, this is a team that is in a hot form, and when Miami is in a hot form, you know that they're going to be good. But there's also that question of how long this hot form is going to last, because, we've seen before where Inter Miami can go on a hot streak, but once it does come to an end, that's when things can start to go badly with this team, and hence, this is also a team that has been very inconsistent this year. Now, moving on, in terms of the last match on this board, is the Colorado Rapids versus Nashville SC, and as I'll talk about in the next board, I actually got the order wrong in terms of talking about some of these games. I was actually supposed to talk about Minnesota versus NYCFC, but I accidentally put the Colorado Rapids versus Nashville SC game kind of out of order. But nevertheless, this game will start at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, but the actual kickoff is 7:08 p.m. local time. The Rapids have a 5-3-5 record, while Nashville has a 5-4-4 record, and as it is the case for a lot of Western Conference team playing against Nashville, especially west of the Mississippi, there's going to be a lot of first ever meetings, and this, of course, is the first ever meeting between both of these teams. Now, in terms of the key points coming into this game for the Rapids, they can actually make some history in this game, where they can tie for the third longest unbeaten streak at home. I mean, one thing we talk about the Rapids that has been so impressive, even going back to last season, is that this team do not lose at home. Like, they have gone 23 games without losing a game at Dick's Sporting Goods Park, and that it's hard to believe that the last time they lost at home what oh, excuse me there. Oh, goodness, I might need some water there. But the last time they lost a game was losing 3-1 to Austin FC, and that also turns out to be historic, but also not in a good way for the Rapids, as they handed Austin FC their first ever win in franchise history. But ever since then, I mean, they have pretty much gone unbeaten in the regular season. I mean, keep in mind, it's the regular season, because I know they did lose against the Timbers in one of the games, but that was back in the playoffs. Whereas for Nashville SC, they're starting to become the Nashville that we know, where this is a team that is hard to get 3 points, because, in the last 9 games, they only lost two of their last 9 games after they got off to a really slow start to the season, and really got off to a start where they were basically equal the same amount of losses that they had in the entire part of last season, and it didn't take them that long to get to that point. I mean, in fact, we're still actually at that point where they have they equal the same amount of losses that they had last season, and it is the case for this year. But like I said, this is a team that is starting to go on an unbeaten run of them own, and for the Rapids, they don't need to win this game to extend their unbeaten run and to reach third of all time as the longest unbeaten home run. But for a fact that they want to win this game, and especially it feels like the Rapids are started to kind of become that team that we've seen before, where they really heavily rely on their home form to get themselves into the playoffs, because we know that when they do play on the road, and especially this season, I think they're one of the few teams have yet to taste victory on the road. They really want to solidify that home form, which again, home form this season has been incredible, and this goes back to last year where nobody has been able to walk out of Dick's Sporting Goods Park or even walk out of the altitude in Commerce City with all three points going back to last year. But that being said, I am now going to switch board and look at the last 3 games that's going to be happening in terms of the busy Saturday night action of match week number 14. But yeah, moving on in terms of the next match is Minnesota versus NYCFC. So this always is a special matchup in terms of a Minnesota United perspective, because this, of course, is a matchup that will forever known as the first ever game that happened at Allianz Field back in 2019. In fact, this is actually the first time that both of these teams have met ever since we had that famous event where Minnesota, of course, played their first ever game at Allianz Field, and that game was definitely one for the ages with them drawing 3-3 against NYCFC. Though coming into this game, I will say that if they can get a point out of this game, it's considered a good result. I mean, it's rare for me to say that about the Loons, especially with them always need to get all 3 points at Allianz Field, because we know that they're a team that struggle on the road, and yet this season they actually haven't been that bad on the road and already have got 2 victories. It's the home form that has been a problem. They have actually lost a couple of games at home so far this season. I think they lost 2 or 3 games so far at home, which is not a very good record for a team that heavily rely on their home form. And it's not going to be easy because they're playing literally the hottest team right now in MLS, that is NYCFC, that have a 7-2-3 record, while Minnesota have a 5-3-5 record. This game will start at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, but the actual kickoff is 7:08 p.m. local time. Again, I'm kind of going out of the order by a mistake when I wrote the board here. But in terms of the all-time meeting, this is only the 4th all-time meeting with both of these teams having 1 win and 1 draw apiece. But key points coming in this game is that, for the Loons, I mean, this is going to be interesting as we get into the rest of the season, where it is pretty clear that, that last game against Union Omaha, where they lost that last one, is rock bottom for this team. Like, that probably is the most embarrassing loss that I think this franchise has ever had. And, there's been a lot of embarrassing loss that Minnesota has. I mean, I think some will still mention the 6-1 loss to Atlanta United in the first ever home game for Minnesota as an embarrassing loss, but I would say that losing to a 3rd division team at home for the U.S. Open Cup is probably beyond the most embarrassing loss that this team has ever suffered, or even maybe right up there. Well, I think maybe it's even higher than the 3-2 loss that they suffer against the Seattle Sounders. And it's going to be interesting to see that after suffering such an embarrassing loss, can they bounce back, or is this the beginning of a free fall for this team? Because there's been a lot of discussion of the fact that, is it time for Minnesota to finally fire Adrian Heath? I mean, the whole Heath out and Heath in movement is definitely in full swing. And again, I think after that result against Union Omaha, this really is the first time that I'm really now leaning toward the Heath out kind of crowd. And that, again, I'll probably maybe even do a video, kind of do a Venn diagram of why Heath in, and then people that is in the middle, and also maybe on the right is the Heath out kind of crowd, because it is pretty clear that this team is once again underachieving this year, and this team should not be underachieving with the talent that they had, and especially with the way that this is a team that is started to becoming another team that is even more frustrating to watch last season. Because at least last season, yes, they were still struggling in terms of scoring goals, but at least they got the result, and they got a decent run before they kind of fall off a little bit near the end. This team has just been mediocre game after game, and that U.S. Open Cup loss pretty much just the icing on the cake of what has just been a very disappointing season. Probably even more disappointing than what we saw in the first 2 years with this team coming into the league. Because at least when this team came into the league, and even though they had some bad season, there had no expectation coming into it. Now, for NYCFC, like I said, they are the hottest team in the league. They have a 6-0-1 record in the last 7, and that is by far the best record in the last 7 game that out of any team in MLS so far, and it's not even close. Like the next team that has have a better record than that, I think, is Montreal and LAFC, and yet that point total is still 6 points less than what NYCFC has done in the last 7 games. So yeah, I mean, it is pretty much almost impossible to stop this NYCFC train that, I talked about how this is a team that despite they won MLS Cup last season, that they're going to be the favorites again, and they're not going to have that hangover coming in. Though I will say that, for this NYCFC team, I think Tati Castellanos is going to be back in this one, and that if he's back in this one, yeah, the Loons have no chance in this one, because we know that when NYCFC without Tati Castellanos, it's still a big question mark. Can they continue to succeed? Because they did kind of look a little bit human, but still were able to get all 3 points in the last game without him. But when NYCFC does have their number 9, yeah, it's pretty much game over for the opposition. So if they can get a point out of this one, or even give NYCFC their first loss in their last seven games, I mean, I think that will consider a miracle. But like I said, this is kind of really now getting to the discussion of, do I even want this team to do well for the rest of the season? Because if this team does do well for the rest of the season, and let's say if they make it to the playoffs but get ousted in the first round, Heath is not going to be fired from this team, and maybe that would be the worst case scenario for this team. And maybe, I think last season when they did make it to the playoffs, as much as it was kind of a good feat for them to make it to the playoffs again, maybe that was something that was the worst case scenario for this team. Because if they didn't make it to the playoffs last season, I would have expected that there could be changes that could be made with this team. And again, with this team, if they don't make it to the playoffs this season, I can expect maybe the Loons might eventually fire Adrian Heath, despite what he's done. I mean, don't get me wrong. I will say that Heath has done well with this team, but I feel like the time has definitely passed, and especially with the way that now I'm hearing players have openly even criticized of the playing style that he has. I mean, yeah, it seems like the writing is definitely on the wall that the Loons maybe need to be moving on with Adrian Heath sooner than later. But now moving on, in terms of the next match, is Sporting KC versus the Vancouver Whitecaps. So speaking of a team that is basically thinking about moving on their head coach sooner than later, that's the case for Peter Vermees. I mean, he's been under a lot of heat lately, and this is probably something that we never thought that we would have said, but he maybe is now on the hot seat with Sporting KC. I mean, they have a 3-4-7 record against the Vancouver Whitecaps that have a 3-2-7 record. This game will start at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, but the actual kickoff is 8:11 p.m. local time. And in terms of the all-time meetings, Sporting KC does have a 13-4-7 record over Vancouver. But really, for this season, it just feels like maybe this is a lost season for Sporting KC, especially the injury that they have dealt with. And yet, despite the fact that this is a lost season, it seemed like Sporting KC, just like how I said for Minnesota, maybe it's the worst case scenario if they can make it to the playoffs. Well, maybe now that there is a worst case scenario, that they're going to just solely focus on the U.S. Open Cup, and especially if they do win the U.S. Open Cup, which they have won it before and they have success in that tournament before, maybe that could also be a worst case scenario for Sporting KC. Though I will say that as bad as it might sound like a worst case scenario, I don't really think so. I mean, winning a trophy is definitely better than not winning a trophy and be mediocre. That is where Minnesota basically stand, and that, for Sporting KC, especially with the way that, yes, I know that they're going to be playing against a giant killer that is Union Omaha, the Cinderella story of the U.S. Open Cup. But as the old saying goes, all Cinderella story eventually will hit midnight, and that I expect for Union Omaha. I mean, unless if this continues, which you would think that surely this doesn't continue. Like, if they do go even to the semifinal or even make it to the final, this would be probably the biggest Cinderella story we have seen, probably since the early days of MLS, when MLS is coming in to the league. And I think, the last big Cinderella story we saw in the U.S. Open Cup was Rochester Rhino, of course, winning in the U.S. Open Cup, but that was mainly because MLS back then was still a very small league, and it's nothing compared to what we see nowadays in modern day. So I think with the modern day MLS and especially with these small teams to even get to this deep. And keep in mind that Rochester Rhino team that won back in '99, that was a second division team. This is the third division team that we're talking about that could do this feat. So I eventually think that the clock would strike midnight, but you never know. I mean against Sporting KC, like I said, they haven't been doing very well so far this season. But that being said, it seems like they are really solely focused on the U.S. Open Cup, with a great chance for them to get to the semifinal, playing again, say, third tier team. But for the Vancouver Whitecaps, I mean, it feels like this is an automatic L for them, because not only the fact that I mentioned this season they've been very poor on the road, but they actually have the worst record in MLS, and it's not even close. I mean, they have lost their first 6 games. I mean, they're on a stretch where they could actually break records in terms of the longest losing streak on the road. And I know it is tough to win on the road, but to go through a losing streak on the road like the one that they're going through right now, yeah, it's definitely not a great feeling for Vanni Sartini team. And again, this is a game that you might think that they have a chance to end it on their losing run, but that Sporting KC want to, like I said, it's a lost season, but they have maybe shown some life, at least in these last 2 games. I mean, ever since that 7-2 demolition, they have started to show some life, and especially they definitely showed life in the U.S. Open Cup by moving into the quarterfinal. Maybe it's not a lost season yet, but there's still a long way to go with the way that, again, this is still a team that a lot has to go right for them if they want to make it to the playoffs and get themselves out of this hole that they dug themselves in. But moving on into the final game that I'm going to talk about, which is RSL versus the Houston Dynamo. So this game will start at 9:30 p.m. Eastern, 6:30 p.m. Pacific, but the actual kickoff is 7:38 p.m. local time. RSL have a 6-4 free record, while the Dynamo have a 5-3-5 record. And this is also a game between two teams that is really punching above their weight, because in terms of the all-time meeting, both teams have 12 wins apiece and 10 draw. And really, the reason why I say that they're punching, both of these teams are punching above their weight, is RSL, a team that is just getting a new owner and just started to kind of build a decent team. And the fact that they're still very unfinished, and a team that we thought that they were going to kind of suffer a bit of a setback after everybody thought that their Western Conference final run last season was a fluke. It hasn't been the case. I mean, in fact, even though I know they kind of fell back down to earth in the last couple of games, they also started to got hot again, and now they continue this unexpected strong season, despite the fact that the underlying number cannot explain why exactly this team is performing so well. And then you got the Houston Dynamo team that, this is supposed to be a team that is rebuilding, and right now they're in the mix of fighting for a playoff position. And what's even more unexpected is the road record. I mean, this season they have a 2-0-3 road record, which doesn't seem like very good until you realize this is a team that I've also mentioned has one of the worst road record for the past couple of seasons. So the fact that they've already won 2 road games out of their first 5 is considered nothing short of a miracle, and that include the last game when they were able to win 3-0 against the LA Galaxy. And keep in mind, the first road win that they had against Inter Miami, they ended a 26 road game winless run. So to say that this team was bad on the road is an understatement. That, like, they had records, historic bad losing run or winless run on the road before they finally snap out of that and get their first road win this season. So again, these two teams are definitely teams that is kind of the reason why they're punching above their weight. But we'll see if that continues, and we'll see whether RSL, who this season we know that they've been very good at Rio Tinto Stadium as always, but they've also been good on the road. And now returning home, they're looking to try to get all 3 points against the Dynamo team that, again, this is a team that was supposed to be rebuilding. But, right now they're still somehow staying afloat, despite, I know there's a lot of Dynamo fans that saying the shoe eventually is going to drop. It hasn't dropped yet, and we'll see whether if that continue as the rest of the season goes along. But either way, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash the subscribe button. Let me know in the comments below what do you think of these 3 games, and also let me know in the comments below the other 8 games I talked about earlier, and your prediction in terms of the 11 games that's going to be happening tomorrow. And like I said, I'll do the preview for the Sunday game, which is only 2 Sunday game that's going to be happening this week tomorrow before the first game of a busy 11-game Saturday night action in MLS. But until then, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys hit a like, smash the subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.